You need to understand how devastating this quest really is. So for those of you who once in a while are inspired because you've read some stupid book, whether it's the Bible or the Quran or in search of the miraculous, a daughter of fire, it makes no difference. When very much like Gilgamesh, you say, I want a taste of that, you better think twice. Yeah, of course, of course. Now, to some extent, I suppose, the spiritual quest is mapped out in this particular way. You sit because you've lost Enkidu, and you're angry, and you're grief-stricken. You're depressed. You feel alone, isolated. You're going to stay in this state of paralysis for a long, long, long time. When you realize that down here there is nothing good for you, that for some strange reason you no longer have intense desires for whatever exists down here, you will find yourself isolated. You find yourself depressed. And there isn't anything you can do about it. You can't will yourself out. You can't watch YouTube videos where people say, stop thinking. I don't think. No thought. No past. No future. Only present. It doesn't work that way. That's not the sort of organisms that we are. Okay? And no one knows when that timetable expires. In other words, no one knows at what stage and how long it's going to take for you to get out of depression, where you say, okay, now I want to move around. Now, Enkidu up to this point for Gilgamesh has been a crutch. He has been leaning on Enkidu for answers. And from this point on, Gilgamesh has to look for answers himself. Okay. Do you have any questions before I continue? Yeah.
I was kind of curious what Enkidu did to stop Ishtar.
To what?
Is it like offend Ishtar?
I think what happened, and it's been a long time, and I've really not read the entire epic in full, because I just don't like to read. So most of the things I'm saying, I'm just making them up. But if memory serves me well, Gilgamesh is very handsome, and the goddess Ishtar from heaven looks down and says, and this is like after they've gone home, after their journey to the forest, and they have killed this monster called humbaba. Gilgamesh has braided his hair, he's shaven, and he just looks beautiful. Ishtar looks down and says, you look hot. And Gilgamesh says, I know. And Ishtar says, you want to do it? And Gilgamesh says, nah, I don't think so. I mean, you're a goddess. You take a minute, you look down and you see a mortal, you see a regular human being, and you say, you want to have sex? And this man looks at you and says, no, I don't think so. I don't want to have sex with you. It's like Angelina Jolie knocks on your door. You want to do it? And you say, no, I'm just, I don't know, doing something. I'm Angelina Jolie. Yeah, that may be so. I'm just not interested. What? And so Ishtar gets offended by this rebuff. Also, Enkidu throws something at her, and she gets offended. So she gets offended. Yeah. But, goddesses, women, what can you do? Now, all of a sudden, Gilgamesh remembers something, that there is this guy who has access to eternal life. There is this wisdom that lives inside him. And he goes by the name King Utnapishtim. Utnapishtim. And the name means he who has found life. Now, one of the things you need to understand about King Utnapishtim is that he doesn't live amongst us. He doesn't find us worthy. He doesn't like to share what he has with the rest of us because he knows we're really not interested. We may be curious, but he's not looking for people who are curious. He's looking for people who truly, desperately want to find eternal life. Not as a distraction, but because they've come to realize things down here, the tables and chairs, have a limited shelf life. That once they have this understanding, now they are ready to be trained. Now, how the hell do you find King Utnapishtim? You begin to journey in darkness. So the first place that Gilgamesh goes to is Mount Mashu, Twin Peaks. One of the things you need to understand about Egypt, Iraq, and all those places is that some places in the Middle East are just flatlands. But their people believe that because the sun comes out of the belly of the mountains and goes back into the belly of the mountains, the gods live in the mountains. Therefore, you have the pyramids. So Mount Mashu, according to Gilgamesh, is where the gods live. Now, he wants to go through this Mount Mashu, but there are scorpion men protecting the grounds. As Gilgamesh walks in, the scorpion men come out and say, "What do you want?" "My name is Gilgamesh." "We don't really care what your name is." "What the hell are you doing here?" "I am looking for King Utnapishtim." "Why?" "I am looking for wisdom." "Why?" "You are a human being. Go back to life. Get married. Have kids. Go to school. Get degrees. Make money. Buy a house. Buy a car. What are you doing here?" "I'm a prince. I have money. I have parents. I have people. They're useless to me. I had a companion named Enkidu. He gave me a taste of something. Life took him from me. And I came to realize life kills everything that it touches and it creates. I don't want to die by life. I want to be immortal." Now, what you need to understand is this: just because you desire wisdom, insight, have access to intuition, it does not make you a worthy student. You will be tested. And with every test, you will either get a passing grade or a mediocre grade, or you simply will fail. Okay? Now, the thing you need to understand is this: Gilgamesh does not desire to forget Enkidu and the presence of death and the cheapness of life. These are devastating things to keep in mind at all times. Once the scorpion men come to realize that Gilgamesh is indeed a worthy student, they allow him to pass. They say, what you need to do now is find Siduri. Who is Siduri, he asks. She is the cosmic barmaid. I have never gotten drunk. I have never, in fact, had alcohol. But from what little my students tell me, at least those who enjoy drinking and smoking and then puking, is that it has both a liberating quality to it and a sickening quality to it. But one of the things that alcohol does Sigmund Freud, and we should have really talked about him in some depth, maybe we'll do at some point. He has this theory called psychosexual theory, and it's quite complex, it's quite fascinating. That, look at us in this room, we are instinctual animals. Some of you are bored, and boredom is not a fun place to be. Some of you perhaps are disgusted by the tone of my voice. Perhaps some of you are disgusted by the ideas I'm sharing with you. Maybe you're just tired. Maybe you hate yourself for signing up for a class for a stupid letter grade. But the point is, all of us in this class have all these intense emotions inside us. And they come within the form of this thing called id. They are basic, they are childish, we are temperamental. We have no choice but to create all these intimate relationships with a world that we despise and hate. What the hell do you do? Well, for this class to continue and for you to get a grade, you need to be socialized. How do you get socialized? Well, you need to have a good superego. You need to have been disciplined by your parents. You don't just open your mouth and talk. You raise your hand. And just in case I say something that pisses you off, you don't just pack your stuff and dash out the door. That's disrespectful. So you just sit there quietly. So Freud argues that all human beings, all these volcanoes, they're all ready to erupt. Why? Because life presses us, pushes us, makes all these demands from us that we don't like, and yet we got to do them. What does that do when you do something you don't want to do? Pressure is built. And this is not positive pleasure, negative pleasure. You're angry. So when you get drunk, when you get high, what happens? The boundaries, the social construct, the superego dissolves. It goes away. And who you really are on the inside will come out. And you really just have to be around stupid people to be liked. So eventually, Gilgamesh finds a Siduri. And Siduri asks him, what are you doing here? You're on sacred grounds. Commoners don't usually come to my tavern. Go back home, get married, have children. He says, no, I've been there, I've done that. They're no good. Siduri comes to realize that Gilgamesh could potentially be a good student, but you have to test him. So she gets him drunk. And even in his drunkenness, Gilgamesh remains the same. I want wisdom. I don't want the stuff that life gives me. I want something that life can't touch, life can't corrupt. That is what I want. He passes this test as well. Then he has to wait and wait and wait for this boatsman named Oshanabi. And eventually he finds him. Oshanabi says, if you want to find King Utnapishtim, we have to go through the waters of death. Long story short, Gilgamesh finds himself in the presence of King Utnapishtim. The first thing that Gilgamesh asks this old man is, how is it that the rest of us mortals will die, but you have been chosen by the gods to stay alive, never to taste death? And this is the story that Utnapishtim tells Gilgamesh. And you can find a similar story in the Quran. You can find a similar story in the Old Testament, in some African sacred traditions. The gods had made human beings. They liked human beings. There came a point where the gods looked down and they realized that human beings are poison to life. They kill things. They make too much noise. They're far too corrupt and contaminated. They're not worthy of life. So the gods came together and decided to create a flood and destroy humanity through this flood. There was one god who raises his hand at this council and says, I do agree with you that human beings are crap, but once in a while you find a few good ones. And the gods say, just because you find one Mahatma Gandhi in 1 billion Indians, just because you find one Muhammad in another billion, just because you find a Malcolm X in another billion, it's not worthwhile for us to keep this game going. Human beings kill animals, destroy trees, destroy the earth. Let's just get rid of them. This particular god named Ea, the god of wisdom, doesn't say anything, appears to Utnapishtim in a dream and says to him, the gods are planning to destroy humanity. Build for yourself a boat. Grab some animals, grab a companion, get yourselves on this boat, make sure that no water will ever enter the boat, because once the flood hits, everything will be destroyed. It is only through you and your companion that human life will continue. I only share that not because it's interesting to the story, but because for those of you who imagine that the Old Testament has original stories, it doesn't. That the life of Jesus Christ is original, it's not. Gilgamesh looks at Utnapishtim and says, give me your wisdom. And Utnapishtim says, no. Give it to me. No. Why? You're stupid. I'm not stupid. Yes, you are. One of the things you need to expect is the following. Should you find a teacher, you will be called stupid. And the truth is, you are. Anyone who lacks experience in a certain branch of life, if you don't know, but you assume that you know, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. By default, you're stupid. Okay, now, Gilgamesh is heartbroken. He has journeyed all this way to find a man so that he could get wisdom, and the guy is refusing to give him anything. And that's the other thing you need to understand. No one can give you understanding. No one can give you wisdom. You got to do it on your own. There is this wonderful story that comes from the Middle East a spy. The Native Americans have a clown or a jester. In the Arab world, but especially the Persian world, his name is Mullah Nasruddin. He was sitting in a class very much like this, and he raises his hand and he says to the instructor, "Do you mind if I leave the room for just 1 minute? I need to go get a drink of water." And the teacher says, "Fine, go ahead, go. Can you bring me some water as well?" "Okay." "Or can you get me a drink too?" "Okay." So he goes to the fountain. He spends a minute drinking water for himself, spends another minute drinking water for his teacher. Comes back to the room, the teacher says, "Where's my drink?" "Well, I drank for you." In other words, just because Utnapishtim is wise, and just because you're hanging out with him, that does not make you wise. Just because you read the dialogues of Plato, you don't become a philosopher. Okay? Mrs. Utnapishtim all of a sudden appears in the scene and looks at her husband and says, "This poor guy has traveled all this way. Give him what he wants." He says, "No." And she looks at him and says, "If you don't give him what he wants, we'll have no dinner." "Okay, I'll give it to him." So you women in this room, if you want to tame your men, no dinner. If you want to be really clever and cunning, do what the Greek women did many centuries ago. When they realized that their men are engaged in an unjust war, they told their men not to go to the battlefield. The men said, "No, we have to." And the women realized, well, they can't really change the government, they can't change the politicians. They said, "What is it that men want?" They came together and said, "Oh, men want sex. When our husbands come home, they want sex, food, and then they'll go back to the war. Let us not have sex with them." So all these men, right? After many weeks on the battlefield, they go home to have some rest, but the women don't give them rest. And they refuse to go back to the battlefield until they had some sex and some food. And the women did not lay with them for weeks, months. Eventually, the war died down. The war ended. Point is, women have a lot of power. Use it. Now, Utnapishtim goes to Gilgamesh and says, "I will give you wisdom, or at least I will tell you where to go to find it, on one condition. Stay awake for 6 days and 6 nights." For those of you who read the Gospel of Mark, I think it's in the Gospel of Mark, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe Matthew, Jesus is taking a couple of his disciples, and he wants to climb this hill and pray, and he looks at his disciples, the 3 of them, and says, "You 3 come with me. Can you stay awake? Make sure you don't sleep." And they say, "Okay." He's 10 minutes into his journey, all of a sudden comes to realize that he forgot his coffee from Pete's. Jesus says, he goes back and finds his disciples all asleep. And he looks at them and says, "Could you have not stayed awake for only a few minutes? Did you really have to fall asleep that quickly?" And the point is this. Here you have disciples hanging out with this wisdom teacher, i.e. Jesus Christ. He is immense, and yet he doesn't have the power to keep the basic stuff of human beings away from his disciples. People will fall asleep because they will forget. Eventually, all of us will fall victim to our flesh. Okay? Gilgamesh falls asleep for 6 days and 6 nights. But still, because King Utnapishtim has a relatively nice young wife who pushes him to share the location of wisdom with Gilgamesh, Utnapishtim says to him, look, there is this river not too far from us. Find this river, dive down. There is this plant. It's called the plant of immortality. Get it, eat it, and you will have immortal life. He finds the river, he dives down, gets the plant, comes out, but he doesn't eat the plant. He goes for a swim. As he comes out to take this plant to his town, Uruk, a serpent comes, eats the plant, sheds her skin, and goes into hiding. And Gilgamesh goes back home empty-handed. Why wouldn't someone eat the plant of immortality? Now, this is where sympathy and empathy and compassion comes in. It's okay. That's fine. It's okay. This is America. People can do what they want. Now, you guys remember Secretary of the State, John Kerry? No? He had gone to Europe and they had asked him some questions, and he had said, America is a land of freedom. If an American wants to be an idiot or stupid, it's his right. Point is, it's a free country. Now, why is it that a man who goes on this journey to figure out how he can find immortality, and once he has found it, he doesn't use it? I want to tell you a story again that comes from the Buddhist tradition. It's a nice tradition because it has very much like the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It contains a lot of stories that have a good amount of depth and they are layered. So at different stages of your own maturity, you will gain something very, very different from the story. The story is that there's a man who has a bow and an arrow, and accidentally, or maybe not so accidentally, he lets the arrow leave the bow, and the bow accidentally goes into someone's back. Now, the tip of the arrow is poisonous. So they rush this man to Kaiser, and the nurses and the doctors gather around this young man, and they all want to pull the arrow out, but they need the patient's consent. So the doctor goes to pull the arrow out, and the young man says, nope, it's my body. Before I let you take the arrow out, tell me, what color is the arrow? And the doctors say, that's really a stupid question. You want to pull the arrow out? Tell me what the color is. You know, you're bleeding. No doubt you're also in pain. That may all be true. I need to know the color of the arrow. See what happens when people ask stupid questions? And so the doctor has no choice but to say, well, the color is red. Goes to pull the arrow out. I said, wait, what's the length of the arrow? You know, you're bleeding. You're going to die. Don't care. What's the length of the arrow? 50 feet. Okay, good job. Again goes to pull the arrow up. Wait, what's the width of the arrow? Another stupid question. 90 feet. Again goes to pull the arrow out. What kind of a wood is it? Walnut, cherry, redwood? According to the Buddhist tradition, this is what the human condition is. If you are born, you have this poisonous arrow inside you. Things will bore you. Things will sicken you. You will become tired of some of the things that you enjoy. You will love, then you will hate. You will always remain discontent. But you and I will never ask, why is it that human life is so tragic? Why is it we pursue only to find ourselves unhappy? We don't ask serious questions. And every time we bleed, and every time pain consumes us, we ask, so what's the color of this pain? What's the width of this pain? Human life is spent in asking ridiculous, futile, stupid, infantile questions. So next time you take a class and someone asks you what is the meaning of life, tell them the story. The meaning of life is just being stupid. Okay? Now, Gilgamesh doesn't eat the plant because he doesn't want to be alone. He looks at his people and he realizes that everybody suffers. And people suffer because they don't know. People suffer because they don't think. People suffer because they don't reflect. And so he says, since I had, and I realized that the things I had didn't really give me much value, and I went on this quest, and I ultimately figured out and found what truly makes human life worth living. I want to share my goods with my people. But here's the thing. He did not find a single ear that could hear his stories. So you know what he did? He wrote on tablets. Why do you write? For those of you in this class who have a journal, why do you have a goddamn journal? Why don't you call a friend and talk to them about the things you want to write? You have a journal because you don't find anyone worthy enough to hold your story. It's your story. It's private. It's sacred. Ultimately, despite all of his suffering and sacrifice, all of his journey, and all the experience and wisdom that he's gained, he comes to realize people really do not want wisdom. People just want to live the normal, casual, superficial life. It's a life worth living. And that is a story of all the people we'll talk about in this class for the next 4 or 5 weeks. That all good teachers eventually come back to society to give to people what they have understood, only to realize no one is interested. And even if they are interested, their interest is profoundly casual and superficial. Do you have any questions? We have... Yes?
Did you discuss together about Socrates?
Socrates? No, I think we talked enough about Socrates last night, the idea of Pegasus, that, I can probably just share with you this particular scene that Plato is about 17, 18. His father is a politician. His mother is relatively religious. His father wants him to go into politics. His father wants Plato to be a lawyer. Plato also has been writing these plays There was this competition in ancient Greece that you write 3 plays every year and you submit your plays to a committee. The committee looks at your plays, and then if they like your plays, then not only will they consider you to be the best playwright in the city, but your play will actually be enacted on the stage. Plato had won this 3 years in a row. So what you have is a man who comes from really, really healthy background. His father is powerful, rich. Plato has a humongous ego. He thinks very highly of himself. Then, tragically enough, or maybe not so tragic, he runs into this man named Socrates. What is it that Socrates has? Why? That's all he says. Why? Why do you write? Why do you want to be famous? Why do you want to go into politics? And when you're assaulted, harassed by why after why after why, you realize you actually have no idea why you're doing anything, why you're doing the things that you're doing. Why are you taking a class? Why do you have the companion that you do? Why do you have the friends that you do? And when you ask enough whys, and you ask enough whys with a good amount of seriousness, you have no choice but to laugh at yourself. And that's one thing that Plato said. If you really, really want to laugh, there is no need to watch Chappelle. There is no need to watch Chris Rock. Just sit back and observe human beings and the things that they do. And you laugh not because it's funny, you laugh because it's sad. Anyone else? So remember, Plato runs into Socrates and his life gets demolished. He doesn't become a lawyer. He doesn't become a politician. He finds a cult. And he just writes. Yes?
Out of the 3, do you have a favorite? Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle?
There was a man long time ago. The story takes place in the Middle East. And one of the things that you will find in the Middle East, and perhaps other traditional environments, Mexico, India, Africa, certain parts, is that you never enter any space that's not yours empty-handed. You always take something with you to present to the host. So in this story, this particular fellow who goes to this person's house takes a duck. And the guy said, "Oh, you brought me a duck, thank you." It's a living, quacking duck. So the duck is quickly taken into the kitchen. The head gets chopped off, the feathers removed, and quickly is made into duck soup. And they sit and, eat the soup together, or drink it together. The next day, there's a knock on the door. And this man opens the door, the host says, "Yes? I'm the friend of the friend who brought you the duck." "Oh, okay, come in, please." Some soup is given to him. The following day, there's another knock, and the guy says, "I'm the friend of the friend of the friend who brought you the duck. Please come in, here's some more soup." And this happens day after day after day. I'm the friend of the friend of the friend of the friend of the friend who brought you the duck. And this man who was given this duck grows tired of all these strangers knocking on his door and asking for food. So he decides to put a stop to this. There's a knock on the door, and the man says, "I'm the friend of the friend of the friend of the friend of the friend who brought the duck." The guy, "Oh, please come in, sit at the table, I'll be right back." And placed before him a bowl of soup. So this man drinks or eats some of the soup and then says, "This is only warm water. This is no way to treat a guest." And the host says, "Well, this is the soup of the soup of the soup of the soup of the soup." Diotima, a woman who lives in the forest, doesn't talk to anyone. Her craft is very simple, deceptively simple. is called love. Not physical love, not intellectual love. It's what we call agape. It's the kingdom of God within you. That is her profession. That is what she teaches. From Diotima comes out Socrates. Diotima has a presence, but so does Socrates. Diotima doesn't talk very much. Socrates talks a lot. So what you have is a watered down version of Diotima, Socrates. Socrates goes to the agora, to the city, talks to people, stings them. Doesn't care who it is. Anyone who's willing to give an ear, Socrates will harass. From Socrates, you have a watered down version we call Plato. Plato saw what happened to his teacher, Socrates, crucified. He doesn't like people. He doesn't go into society. He doesn't talk to people like you and I. He creates a cult. He writes, Diotima is hands-on. Hands-on. She knows exactly how to produce inside you certain emotions and then guides those emotions until you understand. Socrates talks to you and then goes home. Plato writes and then assumes that if you're able to read, eventually you'll get it. You won't. And then you have Aristotle, another watered down version. And what you have is a guy who doesn't like Plato that much. What you have is a guy who came to realize that his life is at risk because he may get crucified, some of the things that he says, so he runs away. Socrates did not run away. And from Aristotle, you have biology. And the point I'm trying to make is as time passes, whatever used to be authentic gets watered down. So of the three, which one I like? Well, it depends on who you are. If you are an extrovert, in other words, if you work with your brain, with your mind, and if you like your intellect and you want to understand things intellectually, and if you're tactile, you will like Aristotle. If you're an introvert, Plato doesn't like things down here. You can read and feel. If you are Diotima, you don't like to read and you don't like to feel. You want to be working with someone who will touch various parts of you and then protect the parts and then guide those parts until growth and maturity is given to you. I read Plato in Persian. I like Plato. I like Socrates too, but I like Diotima because I'm heterosexual. Anyone else? No one? Today is Wednesday? Tuesday? When we come back tomorrow, we shall go into Hinduism. It's an interesting tradition. It's no different than Gilgamesh, really. Just the same thing in a different way. Yeah. So, if you got bored tonight, expect yourself to get bored tomorrow night. Any questions or comments before we go? Okay. Have a good evening. Thank you.